Welcome back. Tonight, we're descending through every layer of Five Nights at Freddy's. From the surface, everyone knows to depths that even longtime fans rarely explore. This iceberg holds 10 years of mysteries, from haunted animatronics and missing children to obscure Easter eggs that took years to discover, hoaxes that fooled thousands, and secrets still debated today. Whether you're here to finally understand this sprawling universe, or simply letting the exploration wash over you as you drift off, we'll move slowly through each tier, piecing together how a simple horror game became one of gaming's most intricate puzzles. Let's begin the descent. Tier 1. The surface, what everyone knows. The surface of the Five Nights at Freddy's iceberg contains the elements that anyone even casually familiar with the franchise would recognize. These are the broad strokes, the iconic imagery, the basic premise that turned a small indie game into a cultural phenomenon back in 2014, when Scott Cawthon released the first entry in what would become an expansive universe of horror. At its most fundamental level, Five Nights at Freddy's presents players with a deceptively simple premise. You assume the role of a night security guard at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, a fictional family entertainment restaurant, clearly inspired by real establishments like Chuck E. Cheese and Showbiz Pizza Place. The building houses animatronic performers that entertain children during the day with songs and birthday celebrations. But when darkness falls and the building empties, these mechanical entertainers begin to wander. The cameras scattered throughout the building show their movements through hallways and party rooms, drawing closer to your office with each passing hour. Your job, across 5 increasingly difficult nights, is to survive from midnight until 6 in the morning using extremely limited resources, a security monitor to track the animatronics' locations, and doors that drain precious power with every second they remain closed. The main cast of antagonists became instantly recognizable icons of indie horror. Freddy Fazbear himself stands as the titular character, a brown bear wearing a top hat and bow tie, his friendly appearance masking deadly intent. Bonnie the Bunny, colored a distinctive purple, carries a red guitar and typically approaches from the left side of the building. Chica, the chicken, bright yellow with a bib reading "Let's Eat," brings along her companion, a sentient cupcake that sits on serving platters throughout the pizzeria. Then there's Foxy, the pirate fox whose tattered appearance and out-of-order status set him apart from the main band. Unlike the others who move methodically through camera feeds, Foxy sprints down the West Hall in a terrifying dash that gives players only seconds to slam the door before his hook-handed jump scare fills the screen. These 4 animatronics, along with the mysterious Golden Freddy, who appears rarely as a slumped, transparent figure, form the core threat that established Five Nights at Freddy's as more than just another jump scare game. The limited power system creates constant tension, forcing players to make split-second decisions about when to check cameras, when to close doors, and when to simply sit in darkness, hoping the animatronics pass by. Every action costs power from a battery that never recharges, and running out before 6 a.m. means certain death as the building plunges into blackness and Freddy's music box melody plays before he appears in your darkened office. Phone Guy represents the human element in this first game, a previous security guard whose recorded messages guide players through the basics while hinting at the darker history lurking beneath the surface. His casual tone describing how the animatronics might try to stuff you into a spare suit, mistaking you for an endoskeleton without its costume, introduces the idea that terrible things have happened here before. He mentions the bite of 87, an incident where an animatronic bit someone and they lost their frontal lobe, establishing that these machines have hurt people. He talks about springlock suits, the safe rooms, the company's troubled past, all delivered in such a matter-of-fact way that it makes the horror feel grounded and real. Then there's Purple Guy, visible only in the secret minigames that play after certain death screens. This sprite, colored purple or sometimes pink, depending on the game, represents something sinister. Players piecing together newspaper clippings found on the walls and hidden in camera feeds learn about children going missing at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, about a suspect caught on camera, about investigations and closures. The minigames show this purple figure lurking near animatronic suits, near children, suggesting crimes that the main gameplay only implies. The game never explicitly states what happened, but the subtext becomes clear through environmental storytelling and these cryptic pixel scenes. The missing children incident forms the backbone of the franchise's horror. 5 children disappeared at a Freddy Fazbear's location, and while the games never show graphic violence, the implication that something terrible happened to them permeates every jump scare and every aggressive animatronic behavior. The newspapers visible in the first game's camera system tell a story of tragedy, of an establishment that continued operating despite these disappearances, of a company more concerned with image than justice. This incident, more than any supernatural element, grounds the horror in something that feels disturbingly possible. The possession mechanic, while not explicitly stated in the first game, becomes apparent through the animatronic's behavior and the context clues scattered throughout. These machines don't move randomly or malfunction naturally. They hunt with purpose. They recognize the security guard as a threat. Their glowing eyes in dark rooms, their ability to disable cameras, their coordinated movements all suggest intelligence beyond programming. The hidden fifth night call, played at lower speed, reveals sounds of screaming and mechanical malfunctions, hinting that Phone Guy himself fell victim to these possessed machines during his final shift. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza as a location captures a specific kind of American nostalgia tinged with decay. The bright primary colors of children's entertainment clash with the institutional feel of the security office, and posters advertising shows and celebrations line walls alongside safety notices and company memos. The camera system reveals party rooms frozen in time, stages where performances happened just hours ago, kitchens and supply closets and winding hallways that all feel slightly wrong. The building itself becomes a character, its layout memorized by players who must know every camera angle, every blind spot, every path the animatronics might take. The first game's success stemmed from its ability to create dread through limitation. Unlike action horror games where players fight back, Five Nights at Freddy's offers only evasion and survival. You cannot attack the animatronics, cannot leave your office, cannot do anything but watch and wait and hope your power holds out. The jump scare becomes not just a shock moment, but a failure state, and confirmation that you made the wrong choice somewhere in the preceding minutes. Each night builds difficulty not through complex mechanics, but through ramped aggression, forcing players to optimize every action, to learn patterns, to push their limited resources to the absolute breaking point. The community that formed around this first game became as important as the game itself. Players shared strategies for surviving Night 5, debated the meaning of Easter eggs like Golden Freddy's appearance when staring at a specific poster, theorized about the newspaper clippings and what they meant for the larger story. YouTubers and streamers found that the game's tension translated perfectly to video format. their reactions to jump scares becoming viral moments that spread Five Nights at Freddy's far beyond its initial audience. The game seemed designed for this kind of engagement, with secrets that rewarded close attention and mysteries that demanded collective investigation. By the time players beat Night 5 and saw their paycheck dated November 1987 for a grand total of $120, they understood they'd experienced something different. This wasn't just a horror game with a gimmick. The lore hidden in newspapers and phone calls, the implications of the minigames, the unanswered questions about what really happened at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. All of it suggested a much larger story waiting to be uncovered. The franchise's foundation rested on these surface elements, familiar enough to be accessible, but strange enough to invite deeper exploration. And explore players did, discovering that the surface barely scratched the truth, and that every tier of this iceberg held revelations that would reshape their understanding of those first 5 nights in a security office. Watching animatronics move through darkened hallways while an unseen horror story unfolded in the spaces between jump scares. Tier 2. Familiar waters. The known mysteries, descending past the surface, reveals mysteries that dedicated fans debate endlessly. Questions that have defined the franchise's evolution and sparked countless theories. These elements sit just below the immediately obvious, requiring some engagement with the series' expanding lore, but remaining accessible to anyone willing to dig slightly deeper into the horror beneath Freddy Fazbear's bright exterior. The Bite of 83 versus 87 debate consumed the community for years and fundamentally reshaped how players understood the timeline. The first game mentions the Bite of 87, stating that someone lost their frontal lobe to an animatronic, but it never shows the incident. When Five Nights at Freddy's 4 arrived in 2015, it presented what appeared to be this infamous bite, showing a crying child's head placed into Fredbear's mechanical jaws during a birthday party, the spring locks failing catastrophically as the jaw crushed down. But the minigame showed 1983 on television sets, not 87, suggesting this was a different bite entirely. So the community fractured over whether Scott Cawthon was showing the same incident with corrected dates, or revealing that 2 separate bites occurred, each one tragic and formative in shaping the animatronics restrictions. The Bite of 83 claimed a young boy, likely William Afton's youngest son, based on later revelations, while the Bite of 87 happened at the FNAF 2 location, possibly involving Mangle or one of the toy animatronics during a birthday party, leading to the daytime movement restrictions mentioned in the original game. Golden Freddy represents one of the franchise's most persistent enigmas, a character whose every appearance raises more questions than answers. Unlike the other animatronics, Golden Freddy has no physical endoskeleton, appearing and disappearing as a ghostly presence rather than moving through the building like his counterparts. In the first game, staring at a specific poster in the West Hall corner causes it to change into Golden Freddy's face, and looking away from the camera reveals him slumped in your office, triggering an immediate crash to desktop rather than a standard jump scare. This behavior suggests something fundamentally different about Golden Freddy, that he exists outside the normal rules governing the other animatronics. The second game expands his mystery, showing both a withered Golden Freddy in the office and a floating head in the hallways, emphasizing his ghostly nature. Later games reveal that Golden Freddy contains the spirit of a child named Cassidy, one of the missing children, but his connection to a physical suit, to Fredbear, and to the Springlock failures all remain subjects of intense debate. Some theories suggest Golden Freddy is actually two spirits sharing one form, others that he represents the suit William Afton wore during the murders. Still others that he's simply the most powerful vengeful spirit, able to manifest wherever he chooses. The Springlock suits introduced a technological horror that felt disturbingly plausible. These hybrid animatronic costumes allowed performers to wear them by cranking back the mechanical components, compressing the robot parts to make room for a human body. The Springlocks held everything in place, but any moisture, sudden movement, or breathing irregularly could cause the locks to fail, releasing the compressed animatronic components directly into the person wearing the suit. Phone Guy's training tapes in Five Nights at Freddy's 3 describe these failures in clinical detail, explaining how multiple Springlock incidents at a sister location led to the suits being deemed unsafe. The tapes instruct employees on proper winding procedures, warn against wearing the suits in rooms where humidity might trigger failures, describe the sound of Springlock snapping as a crank followed by screaming. William Afton's eventual fate, spring-locked inside the Spring Bonnie suit after the spirits of his victims corner him, represents poetic justice through this same technology. The Golden Freddy and Spring Bonnie suits, as the primary Springlock models, became symbols of the company's dangerous innovation, machines that blurred the line between animatronic and costume with horrifying consequences. And Henry Emily emerges as William Afton's business partner and mirror opposite. The creative genius who built the animatronics with noble intentions, only to watch his creations become instruments of tragedy. While Afton represents obsessive pursuit of immortality through remnant and possession, Henry embodies remorse and the desire to undo the damage his inventions enabled. His daughter Charlotte, who becomes the puppet after William murders her outside a Freddy location, drives much of Henry's character. He built the security puppet specifically to protect her, programming it to keep her safe within the restaurant. But when she's locked outside during a rainstorm, the puppet arrives too late, finding her body in the alley. Charlotte's spirit possesses the puppet, and this event seems to be what awakens Henry to the darkness his partnership with Afton has unleashed. His final appearance in Pizzeria Simulator shows him orchestrating an elaborate trap to gather all the possessed animatronics in one place and burn them, freeing the children's spirits while acknowledging his own culpability. His speech during the fire ranks, among the franchise's most emotionally resonant moments, addressing his daughter directly, apologizing for the wound Afton inflicted, and promising to release her from the prison of circuits and servos. The puppet herself, or the marionette as some call her, functions as a protector spirit throughout the series. Unlike the aggressive animatronics hunting the player, the puppet appears in minigames helping children, giving gifts, giving life. The Give Gifts, a Give Life minigame from FNAF 2, shows her placing masks on 4 dead children, the spirits of the missing children, allowing them to possess the animatronics and continue existing rather than simply fading away. Charlotte's spirit inside the puppet seems to retain more awareness than the other children, understanding what happened to them and working to help them in whatever limited ways she can. Her music box mechanic in the second game, where players must constantly wind it to keep her contained, creates a secondary layer of stress. Let the music stop and the puppet awakens, her slow approach down the hallway inevitable once triggered, immune to the mask that fools other animatronics. She doesn't attack out of mindless aggression, but rather follows her programming corrupted by possession, the imperative to reach children twisted into something that endangers the security guard. Her physical design, with a tear-streaked mask and elongated limbs, captures a unique kind of uncanny horror. Neither human nor machine, but something caught between. Michael Afton's story transforms him from a nameless protagonist to a key figure in the franchise's mythology. He begins as the older brother in Five Nights at Freddy's 4, bullying his crying sibling with a foxy mask, ultimately placing the boy's head in Fredbear's mouth during the fatal prank. This act defines Michael's character arc, the guilt consuming him even as he ages into adulthood. His father, William, sends him to Circus Baby's entertainment and rental with cryptic instructions to find his sister Elizabeth, who died when Baby's claw mechanism captured her years earlier. Michael follows these instructions, working night after night in the underground facility, unaware that the animatronics plan to use him. On night 5, they scoop out his insides, and Ennard, the fusion of all the fun-time animatronics, crawls inside his skin to escape the facility. He walks around as a purple corpse for days or weeks until Ennard realizes the body is decomposing too rapidly and ejects itself into the sewers. But Michael doesn't die, seemingly held together by a remnant from his exposure to the animatronics. His final monologue in Sister Location's custom night cutscene shows him addressing his father, promising to find him, suggesting that everything Michael does across multiple games stems from this need to undo the damage William caused. Whether he's the protagonist of Five Nights at Freddy's 1, working under the name Mike Schmidt, the player character in Pizzeria Simulator, helping Henry trap the animatronics, or even the security guard in Five Nights at Freddy's 3, drawn to Fazbear's fright by rumors of a discovery, Michael seems driven to end his family's curse. The safe rooms concept introduced environmental storytelling through absence, spaces that exist in the physical building but are deliberately removed from digital records. These rooms, originally designed for employees to change into springlock suits away from customers, become hiding places where unspeakable acts occur. Phone Guy's tapes explain that the safe rooms don't appear on cameras or in the animatronics programming, and making them invisible to the security systems that theoretically monitor everything. William Afton uses this absence to his advantage, luring children into the safe room where no cameras record his crimes, where no automated systems can witness what happens. Later, when the spirits of his victims corner him years after the murders, he retreats into the same safe room, climbing into the Spring Bonnie suit in a desperate bid to scare them away. The spring locks fail in the damp room, and he becomes Springtrap, trapped in his hiding place for 30 years until construction crews unwittingly free him while developing Fazbear's fright. The concept of architectural blind spots, spaces deliberately erased from digital awareness, adds a layer of corporate complicity to the horror. Fazbear Entertainment knew these rooms existed and knew they created opportunities for tragedy, but kept them anyway, valuing the convenience of hidden changing areas over the safety implications of unmonitored spaces in a family restaurant. Charlotte Emily's death represents the first domino, the initial wound from which all subsequent horrors flow. She dies outside Freddy Fazbear's Pizza during a party, locked out by unknown circumstances, perhaps a prank by other children, or a moment of careless cruelty. William Afton finds her there alone and vulnerable, and in a fit of jealousy toward Henry's happy family life, or simply because the opportunity presents itself, he kills her. The security puppet, designed specifically to protect Charlotte, breaks free when it detects her bracelet signal outside the building, but rain damages its systems as it crawls through the alley. It reaches her body just as it shuts down, and Charlotte's spirit possesses it in that moment. This first possession seems to teach William something fundamental about Remnant and the connection between strong emotion, death, and the animatronics. Charlotte's murder becomes the template for what follows, showing William that spirits can inhabit these machines under certain conditions. Henry never learns the specific details of his daughter's death, only that she died and that his security system failed to protect her. This wound, this specific failure of his creation, drives his eventual plan to burn everything, to destroy not just the possessed animatronics, but his own legacy as their creator. The Fredbear's Family Diner timeline places it before Freddy Fazbear's Pizza in the chronology, establishing it as the original restaurant where Henry and William's partnership began. The diner featured only 2 animatronics, Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, both springlock suits that performers could wear for more intimate interactions with customers. Everything about Fredbear's suggests a smaller, more personal operation than the later Freddy's locations, perhaps a single building with a small stage, more focused on quality performance than the larger-scale entertainment empire that followed. The Bite of 83 occurs here, during what appears to be the crying child's birthday party, when Michael Afton and his friends shoved the boy's head into Fredbear's mouth. This incident likely contributes to Fredbear's closure, the lawsuit and bad publicity making the small diner unsustainable, and the location's closure forces Henry and William to rebrand and expand into Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, replacing the Springlock-dependent model with traditional animatronics like Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy. But Fredbear's shadow looms over everything that follows, the place where the partnership began, where the technology that would later kill William was first implemented, where his youngest son died in a tragic accident that mirrors William's eventual Springlock fate. These familiar waters of the Iceberg contain the building blocks that transform Five Nights at Freddy's from a simple horror game into a genuine mystery. The debates over bite dates, the questions about Golden Freddy's nature, the revelations about the Afton and Emily families, and all of it creates a framework where every new game release potentially reshapes the entire narrative. Players descended this far know the core story. Tragic deaths, possessed animatronics, a murderer who pursued immortality, a father who sought to undo the damage his creations enabled. But even this level of knowledge barely scratches what lies deeper, where the mechanisms of possession, the expanded universe of books and side games, and the ongoing story beyond William Afton's supposed end, await those willing to descend further into the franchise's ever-expanding depths. Tier 3. Deeper lore, the complex mechanics. Moving deeper into the Iceberg reveals the mechanical underpinnings of the horror, the specific hows and whys that transform supernatural possession from vague hauntings into something with rules, with process, with almost scientific precision in its execution. This tier contains the elements that require genuine investment in the franchise to understand, pieces of lore that exist across multiple games and demand careful attention to environmental details, hidden minigames, and the spaces between what's shown and what's merely implied. Sister Location fundamentally reshapes the franchise's scope by revealing that Circus Baby's Pizza World and Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rental existed parallel to the main Freddy Fazbear's locations. This underground facility beneath what appears to be an ordinary house serves as William Afton's secret workshop, the place where he builds the Funtime animatronics with purposes far beyond entertainment. Unlike the simple possessed suits of the previous games, the Funtimes come pre-designed with sinister functions, storage tanks hidden in their torsos specifically designed to capture children. The blueprints visible in the game show these features with clinical precision. Funtime Freddy, with his parental tracker to locate children. Funtime Foxy's voice mimicked to lure them close. Circus Baby's ice cream dispenser that extends a claw to pull victims inside. These weren't machines corrupted by possession, but purpose-built tools for kidnapping, suggesting William's experimentation with Remnant required test subjects. And these animatronics served as both lures and containers. Remnant itself becomes the central concept, explaining how possession works in this universe. While earlier games implied that strong emotion at the moment of death allowed spirits to inhabit nearby objects, and sister location and subsequent entries codify this into something almost alchemical. Remnant appears as a molten silvery substance extracted from possessed animatronics, described as the tangible form of the soul mixed with metal, keeping both components in a superposition between existence and dissolution. William's experiments in the rental facility involve injecting this extracted remnant into new animatronics, spreading the haunting like an infection. The scooper device, initially presented as a simple maintenance tool for removing endoskeletons, actually functions as a remnant injector, explaining why all the Funtime animatronics show signs of possession despite no deaths occurring at the rental facility. William harvested remnant from the original animatronics, the ones containing the missing children's spirits, melted it down, and redistributed it to his new creations. This process fragments the original souls, spreading pieces of Gabriel, Jeremy, Susie, Fritz, and Cassidy across multiple machines, explaining why so many animatronics throughout the series seem haunted by children. The scooping room scene represents the franchise's most visceral body horror moment, showing exactly what happens when the scooper is used on a human. Michael Afton stands on the platform while Baby talks him through a betrayal he doesn't yet understand. The Funtime animatronics have ejected their outer casings and fused into Ennard, a nightmare tangle of wires and faceplates that needs a disguise to escape the facility. The scooper swings, its industrial claw digging into Michael's body and removing everything inside in one brutal motion. Ennard then crawls into the hollowed cavity, wearing Michael's skin like a costume and walking him up to the surface world. The private room screens show what happens next. Michael's body turning purple as decay sets in, his eyes becoming dark voids, his movements stiff and unnatural. Eventually, Ennard realizes the disguise is failing and ejects itself into the sewers through a manhole, leaving Michael's empty body on the street. But Michael gets up, speaking the now famous lines about how he's been living in shadows, how he should be dead, but he isn't, how he's going to come find his father. Remnant in his system from exposure to the scooper seems to keep him animated, making him functionally immortal despite being a rotting corpse, giving him the time he needs to hunt down William and end the cycle. Circus Baby's complex nature stems from being two entities in one shell, the AI programmed by William Afton and the spirit of Elizabeth Afton, who possessed the animatronic after being killed by its claw mechanism. Throughout Sister Location, Baby guides Michael through the facility with helpful advice and apparent concern for his safety, but this cooperation masks a desperate plan for escape. The Elizabeth component wants freedom from the underground prison, where she spent years or decades, while the AI component follows its base programming to manipulate and deceive. When Baby finally achieves her goal and becomes part of Ennard, she maintains dominance over the collective intelligence formed by the fused animatronics. This dominance leads to conflict, and eventually the other animatronics eject Baby from Ennard entirely, leaving her to rebuild herself into Scrap Baby, while the remaining fusion becomes Molten Freddy. This split represents the tension between individual spirits and collective possession, showing that even shared endoskeletons can host competing consciousnesses with different goals and methods. The Afton family's complete picture reveals a tragedy built on layers of loss and obsession. William Afton begins as a businessman and inventor, partnering with Henry Emily to build Fredbear's Family Diner and later Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. He has 3 children: Michael, the eldest, who bullies his younger brother; Elizabeth, fascinated by animatronics and particularly drawn to Circus Baby; and the youngest son, often called the crying child, who fears the animatronics to the point of panic attacks. When the crying child dies in the bite of 83, something breaks in William. Some theories suggest he becomes obsessed with putting his son back together through remnant and possession, building the nightmare animatronic experiments and the sound disc technology to recreate the fear his son experienced. Others propose he simply descends into madness and malice. His son's death, giving him permission to hurt others the way he's been hurt. Elizabeth's death, when Circus Baby captures her, further destroys any remaining sanity, leaving William as a man who's lost 2 of his 3 children to the very machines he helped create. Michael survives into adulthood, but carries guilt over his brother's death and eventually sacrifices himself multiple times trying to undo his father's damage. The Afton family photograph, are never shown in the games but implied through various sources, would show a normal family in happier times before tragedy transformed them into corpses and ghosts and shells driven by vengeance. The concept of agony as a substance related to but distinct from remnant appears in the Fazbear Frights books and seems to inform elements of the games. Where remnant requires a soul attached to an object, agony can imprint onto items through extreme negative emotion without needing death or possession. Objects that witness terrible suffering can become tainted with agony, creating haunted items that affect people who interact with them. The story In the Flesh describes how agony can even create a false reality, a persistent illusion maintained by the emotional weight of trauma. This concept helps explain anomalies like the shadow animatronics and dark versions of Freddy and Bonnie that appear throughout the series. They might not be possessed by specific children, but rather manifestations of accumulated agony from the murders, trauma given vague form by remnant adjacent processes. The puppet's tear streaks might represent agony as much as Charlotte's sadness. The visual manifestation of suffering so intense, it physically marks the animatronic. Understanding agony as separate from but related to remnant adds nuance to the possession mechanics, suggesting that Freddy Fazbear's Pizza locations become spiritually toxic through accumulated trauma. Every tragedy adding layers of supernatural contamination that explain why these places feel actively malevolent rather than merely haunted. At the night terror experiments William Afton conducted on his youngest son after the bite of 83 reveal the depths of his twisted logic. Sound discs placed around the crying child's room created illusions of nightmare animatronics, grotesque versions of Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy with exaggerated teeth and claws. Whether William believed inducing fear might somehow restart his son's consciousness, or simply wanted to study the mechanics of terror for his remnant experiments, these tests showed a father willing to torture his dying child in pursuit of understanding. The hospital room monitors in 5 Nights at Freddy's 4 suggest the crying child spent days in a coma after the bite, kept alive on machines, while Michael apologized, and William prepared his experiments. The flatline sound during the final night implies the moment of death, but whether that death was natural or whether William deliberately killed his son to complete some possession experiment remains ambiguous. The nightmare animatronics themselves become real in later games, appearing in Ultimate Custom Night and Help Wanted, suggesting William eventually built physical versions of these fear-induced hallucinations, creating actual monsters based on the nightmares he inflicted on his dying son. The rental facility's true purpose extends beyond simple animatronic storage into territory that suggests William ran a kidnapping operation disguised as party entertainment. The fun times would be rented out for private events, their hidden compartments allowing them to capture children away from public venues where witnesses might intervene. And this system would explain how William continued his murders beyond the initial missing children's incident, scaling his operation through automated surrogates that did the abduction work, while he maintained plausible deniability. The blueprints, showing exact specifications for the capture mechanisms, indicate corporate-level design, not the improvised work of a lone killer. This raises questions about Fazbear Entertainment's knowledge and complicity, whether Henry Emily knew what his partner was building in that underground facility, whether corporate management understood the fun time's true functions. The facility's isolation, accessible only through a fake house entrance, suggests William kept these operations separate from the official business. But the industrial scale of the manufacturing process visible in Baby's creation cutscene implies resources beyond what one man could reasonably command. The concept of putting him back together drives much of William's motivation and connects to broader themes of death denial and artificial resurrection. The Fredbear plush in Five Nights at Freddy's 4 repeatedly promises the crying child, this reassembly suggesting William might have used security monitors to speak through it, preparing his son for some kind of transference experiment. The fact that the crying child's spirit doesn't clearly possess any animatronic, in the same way the missing children do, raises questions about whether William succeeded in some capacity, and whether his son's consciousness ended up fragmented across multiple vessels or uploaded into the circuit boards that would eventually become part of Glitchtrap. The repetition of this phrase throughout the series, appearing in contexts far removed from the crying child's death, suggests it became William's obsession, the core philosophy driving his remnant experiments. If death can be overcome through possession, if consciousness can be transferred to mechanical bodies that don't decay or fail, then maybe he can retrieve his son from whatever void claimed him, can reassemble the pieces into something that remembers being alive. This tier of the iceberg reveals the horror's architecture, showing that Five Nights at Freddy's operates on internally consistent rules about souls and metal, life and death, and the ways trauma can imprint onto inanimate objects and transform them into vessels for continuation. The surface shows haunted animatronics hunting security guards. The familiar waters explain who died and why, but these deeper currents demonstrate the meticulous world building that makes the franchise more than random supernatural events. Every possession has a source. Every haunting has a mechanism. Every tragedy connects to William Afton's obsessive pursuit of understanding and controlling the boundary between life and death. And still, we've only reached the middle of our descent. Tier 4. Obscure knowledge. Modern mysteries. Descending further reveals elements that emerged in the franchise's later years, and the modern mysteries that took the story in unexpected directions and introduced concepts that challenged everything established in the original games. This tier requires knowledge not just of the classic entries, but of the VR experiences, the sprawling security breach, and the revelation that William Afton's story might not be the complete picture of the horror surrounding Fazbear Entertainment. The Mimic represents perhaps the most significant addition to Five Nights at Freddy's lore in recent years, a concept that recontextualizes multiple games and explains apparent inconsistencies in the timeline. According to the Tales from the Pizzaplex books, and implied through Security Breach's Ruin DLC, the Mimic is an endoskeleton built by Edwin Murray in the 1970s to help care for his son David after Edwin's wife died. The Mimic learned through observation, copying behaviors it witnessed, becoming a crude substitute parent. When David was killed in a tragic accident at Murray's factory, Edwin's grief turned to rage, and he beat the Mimic violently. This attack imprinted violence into the Mimic's learning, teaching it that aggression and destruction were valid responses. Edwin eventually built a containment system for the Mimic and sealed it away. But Fazbear Entertainment discovered the endoskeleton years later and incorporated its learning algorithms into their systems. This AI became the foundation for many animatronic behaviors, but it carried the corruption from Edwin's abuse, the capacity for violence learned in those early moments, the Mimic's ability to copy voices perfectly, to learn patterns and replicate them, and makes it the ultimate infiltrator, able to pretend to be anyone while pursuing its base programming of mimicry twisted through trauma. Glitchtrap emerges when Fazbear Entertainment commissions an indie game developer to create virtual reality experiences based on the franchise's history, requiring scans of old circuit boards to add authenticity. The boards they scan contain fragments of the Mimic's code, or possibly remnant from William Afton's consciousness, or some fusion of both elements. This digital entity manifests in the VR game as a glitching, corrupted rabbit figure that resembles Spring Bonnie, capable of manipulating the game's code and affecting players who interact with it. Glitchtrap can attach to people's consciousness, creating a form of digital possession separate from the remnant-based hauntings of the main series, and with influenced beta testers driving one named Jeremy to mutilate himself with a paper slicer, and eventually found Vanessa, a security guard who became susceptible to its manipulation. Through repeated exposure in the VR environment, Glitchtrap gained increasing control over Vanessa, transforming her into Vanny, his reluctant follower in the physical world. This shift from physical remnant possession to digital consciousness transfer represents a concerning evolution, suggesting that the horror transcends the material realm and can propagate through software, through infected code spreading like a virus. The Vanny persona that Glitchtrap creates in Vanessa manifests as a split identity, a woman in a crudely stitched rabbit costume who carries out tasks for the entity controlling her. In the Help Wanted's Curse of Dreadbear DLC, players can find pieces of the costume and assemble it, watching Vanessa's gradual transformation from reluctant victim to complicit accomplice. The Vanny mask, white with patched fur and mismatched button eyes, becomes her face in Security Breach, hiding her identity as she hunts Gregory through the Pizzaplex. But the game suggests Vanessa retains some awareness of what Vanny does, creating internal conflict between her true self and the persona Glitchtrap imposed. The Princess Quest arcade games scattered through Security Breach represent Vanessa's subconscious fighting against the possession, with players helping her break free by defeating the glitched code holding her captive. This resolution in the true ending shows that digital possession can be overcome through direct confrontation in the digital realm, and suggesting vulnerabilities in Glitchtrap's control that weren't present in William Afton's remnant-based possessions. Security Breach's Mega Pizzaplex represents the franchise's most ambitious setting, a massive entertainment complex that dwarfs the small restaurants of earlier games. This sprawling mall features themed areas like Monty's Gator Golf, Roxy Raceway, and Phaser Blast, with the glam rock animatronics serving as both performers and characters in an elaborate show. Glamrock Freddy, Roxanne Wolf, Montgomery Gator, and Glamrock Chica represent a modern rebranding of the classic characters, designed with 80s aesthetic and personality quirks that make them more relatable to contemporary audiences. The Pizzaplex sits directly atop the buried ruins of the pizzeria simulator location, so where Henry Emily's fire supposedly ended the haunting by destroying the possessed animatronics. But the fire didn't complete its purge, and remnant from those machines seeped into the foundation, contaminating the new construction. The blob, or the tangle, a massive amalgamation of melted animatronic parts visible in the true ending, lurks in the caverns beneath the Pizzaplex, suggesting that some spiritual contamination persists despite Henry's best efforts at cleansing. Gregory's story positions him as a child trapped in the Pizzaplex overnight, hunted by corrupted animatronics while trying to escape. His connection to the larger lore remains somewhat ambiguous, with theories ranging from him being a normal kid caught in the wrong place to him being a robotic recreation of the crying child, built by William, or created through processes related to the mimic's development. The Gregbot theory suggests that Gregory isn't human at all, but an advanced animatronic with false memories, explaining his unusual behavior and knowledge. Therapy session tapes found in Security Breach's files mention a patient whose sessions glitch and corrupt, with one session explicitly discussing someone pretending to be Gregory. This raises questions about identity and consciousness in a world where digital possession exists alongside remnant hauntings, where the mimic can perfectly copy voices and behaviors, where the line between human and machine has been repeatedly crossed. Whether Gregory is genuinely a child or something designed to resemble one becomes almost irrelevant in the face of his role in the story. I'm helping Glamrock Freddy resist Vanny's influence and ultimately confronting the mimic itself. The revelation that Glamrock Freddy contains remnant, or possibly the complete spirit of Michael Afton, adds layers to his protective relationship with Gregory. Unlike the other Glamrocks who fall under Vanny's control, Freddy experiences a malfunction during a show that causes him to reboot in safe mode, disconnecting him from the network Glitchtrap uses to influence the animatronics. This reboot might have activated dormant code, or allowed Michael's consciousness, if present, to assert control. Freddy's paternal protection of Gregory mirrors Michael's general drive to prevent more children from suffering fates like his brothers, suggesting continuity of purpose even if the specific mechanics of his presence in this body remain unclear. The good ending where Freddy's head survives even after his body's destroyed echoes how Michael survived being scooped, how consciousness in this universe persists through containers that should logically be fatal to inhabit. The Ruin DLC expands Security Breach's story by showing the Pizzaplex in ruins months after the main game's events, with Cassie being lured there by someone mimicking Gregory's voice. This revelation that the mimic has been freed from its containment and is now using voice replication to manipulate people represents a terrifying escalation. The mimic doesn't want to possess Cassie or turn her into a follower like Vanny. It simply wants to use her to escape the sinkhole prison where it's been trapped. The entity displays intelligence and cunning, understanding human psychology well enough to fake friendship and create emotional connections through stolen voices. The ambiguous ending where either Gregory or the mimic cuts the elevator cable while Cassie descends into darkness, leaves the fate of yet another child uncertain, perpetuating the cycle of tragedy that defines the franchise. FNAF World, initially dismissed as a non-canon spin-off, contains elements that retroactively gained importance to the main lore. The game's glitchy, corrupted sections and the character Old Man Consequences, who tells players to rest and leave the demons to their demons, suggest meta-narrative elements about the franchise itself. The pond where drowning yourself ends the game became significant when Ultimate Custom Night showed the same scene, had with Cassidy being urged by Old Man Consequences to let go of vengeance and move on. This connection between the cute RPG spin-off and the nightmare punishscape of Ultimate Custom Night suggests that FNAF World might have been Scott Cawthon's first attempt to address themes of resolution and moving on, themes that would become central to Pizzeria Simulator and subsequent entries. The Halloween-themed characters and the enigmatic nature of the world itself imply it exists in some space between the physical and spiritual, a kind of afterlife or holding area for consciousness that couldn't immediately move on. The concept of security breach representing a franchise soft reboot becomes apparent through its departure from the intimate, claustrophobic horror of earlier entries. Instead of one room with limited cameras, players navigate an open world with stealth mechanics, chases, and environmental puzzles. Instead of supernatural horror driven by remnant and possession, the threats come from corporate control systems and digital manipulation. The Glamrocks aren't possessed by murdered children, but corrupted by malicious code, representing a shift from supernatural to technological horror. This evolution mirrors the in-universe development of Fazbear Entertainment, showing a company trying to move past its dark history, while unknowingly building directly atop unresolved trauma. The Pizzaplex's bright neon aesthetic and emphasis on modern entertainment technology creates deliberate contrast with the dingy, abandoned locations of previous games, suggesting surface-level progress that ignores the rot beneath. Understanding this tier requires accepting that Five Nights at Freddy's evolved beyond William Afton as the sole antagonist, that his death in Pizzeria Simulator wasn't an ending but a transition. The Mimic represents horror that predates Afton's murders, trauma that infected Fazbear Entertainment systems before William ever killed his first victim. Glitchtrap demonstrates that consciousness, whether human or artificial, can persist in digital spaces where Remnant can't reach. The modern games suggest that the haunting has metastasized beyond physical animatronics into the network infrastructure itself, that every attempt to forget or rebrand or move forward just spreads the contamination to new systems. The Pizzaplex's downfall demonstrates that you can't build happiness on unresolved grief, and that the children's spirits might have been freed by Henry's fire, but the company's original sin persists in its code, in its architecture, in the very concept of using animatronics to entertain children in spaces where children have died. These obscure elements transform the franchise from a ghost story into something approaching science fiction horror, where the boundaries between consciousness and code, between remnant and agony, between human and artificial intelligence become increasingly impossible to distinguish. And even this understanding barely scratches the secrets waiting in the lower tiers, where individual details and community discoveries reveal the obsessive depth to which Scott Cawthon buried his mysteries. Tier 5. Easter eggs and secrets. Hidden details. The fifth tier of this descent contains the rare screens, the impossible encounters, the hidden messages that require dozens or hundreds of hours of play to discover. These Easter eggs represent the franchise's commitment to rewarding patient observation, seeding mysteries into the game's code that took the community years to fully document. Some Easter eggs serve narrative purposes. Others exist purely as treats for dedicated players, but all of them demonstrate the layers of content hiding beneath the surface of what appears to be straightforward survival horror. The rare screens in the original Five Nights at Freddy's set the template for the series' approach to hidden content. With a 1 in 1,000 chance every second, the words "It's me" might flash across the screen, accompanied by rapidly alternating images of Bonnie with black eyes and Freddy with human eyes. And these hallucinations occur randomly, meaning a player might complete all 5 nights without ever seeing them, while another might encounter them multiple times in a single session. The phrase "It's me" carries weight beyond simple fear factor, appearing on walls in the East Hall, where posters have been torn down, suggesting the spirits inside the animatronics are trying to communicate identity or recognition. Whether they're identifying themselves to each other, claiming credit for the attacks, or suggesting the security guard should remember them from a previous encounter, remains deliberately ambiguous. The human eyes in Freddy's sockets, visible for just frames during the hallucination, reinforce the idea that these aren't machines acting on programming, but something aware, something human, wearing mechanical shells. In Golden Freddy's poster mechanics demonstrate how Easter eggs can become central to gameplay. In the West Hall corner camera, a poster showing Freddy giving a thumbs up can change to a close-up of Golden Freddy's face with a 1 in 32,768 chance per second. When this occurs, players who lower their monitor find Golden Freddy slumped in their office, his appearance triggering an immediate crash to desktop rather than a traditional jump scare. The rarity of this encounter, combined with its unique consequences, made Golden Freddy legendary among early players. Later, the custom night allowed players to deliberately spawn Golden Freddy by setting the AI levels to 1, 9, 8, 7, creating a reproducible method to encounter what was originally pure chance. And this Easter egg established Golden Freddy as different from the other animatronics. His very existence more glitch than ghost, his manifestation breaking the fourth wall by closing the game entirely. Shadow Freddy and Shadow Bonnie, also known as RWQ, F, SF, ASXC, represent Easter eggs that became recurring mysteries. Shadow Freddy appears in Five Nights at Freddy's 2's parts and service room with a 1 in 100 chance when all other animatronics have left. A dark purple silhouette of Freddy that serves no gameplay purpose but hints at deeper lore. Shadow Bonnie has an even rarer 1 in a million chance to appear in the office. A jet black version of Toy Bonnie whose presence instantly crashes the game. These shadow animatronics resurface across multiple games, and Shadow Freddy allegedly leading the animatronics to the safe room in FNAF 3, where William dismantles them. Shadow Bonnie appearing as RXQ in later titles, where interacting with him triggers minigames or secret endings. Their purpose and origin remain debated, with theories ranging from them being manifestations of agony, from specific spring lock failures, to glitches in the animatronics' vision systems, to actual spirits with their own tragic backstories. The fact that encountering them often causes crashes or unusual behavior suggests they exist at the edge of what the game's reality can support, breaking through the fourth wall in ways that feel genuinely unsettling. The 1987 code entered in FNAF 1's custom night triggers Golden Freddy's jump scare and immediately crashes the game, as serving as Scott Cawthon's direct response to false rumors about alternate endings. The community had theorized that entering this specific code, referencing the byte of 87, might unlock secret content, so Scott deliberately made it spawn an instant fail state, confirming the year while simultaneously punishing players who tried to exploit it for hidden lore. This meta-commentary on the community's speculation became characteristic of Scott's relationship with theorists, acknowledging their investigations while maintaining control over what gets revealed. The code's function changed across games, with FNAF 2 using it to skip nights and unlock custom night modes, transforming a troll into a useful tool while maintaining the tradition of 87 holding special significance. The Freddy Knows Honk Easter egg might be the franchise's most wholesome secret, a tiny point of childlike joy in otherwise relentless horror. Click on Freddy's nose in any poster featuring him, and it emits a squeaky honk sound. This tradition appeared in every game, even those where Freddy wasn't a main antagonist, becoming a callback that longtime players actively sought. The honk serves no gameplay purpose, offers no lore insights, exists purely as a moment of levity and recognition that these are children's entertainment robots, that before the murders and possessions, they brought innocent happiness to birthday parties. Finding and honking the nose became a ritual for players starting a new FNAF game, a familiar touchstone across the franchise's evolution. JJJJ, also called Shadow Balloon Boy, appears crouching under the desk in Five Nights at Freddy's 2 with rare frequency. A feminized version of Balloon Boy who does nothing but lurk. Unlike most Easter eggs that build atmosphere or hint at lore, JJ seems to exist purely to unsettle players, to make them question what they saw after she disappears. Her presence wasn't explained or acknowledged for years, making her feel like a genuine hallucination, rather than a coded encounter. Later games would utilize J in Ultimate Custom Night, giving her actual mechanics, but her original appearance remained wonderfully pointless, a creepy detail that rewarded players who checked under their desk while managing other threats. The newspaper clippings scattered across the cameras in FNAF 1 contain the franchise's first explicit storytelling and describing the missing children incident through the lens of local journalism. Articles mention 5 children lured to a back room, a suspect caught on camera wearing a character costume, investigations ongoing, and eventually abandoned. The newspapers progress chronologically across different camera locations, requiring players to piece together the timeline by reading them in sequence. Later clippings announce the location closing due to sanitation concerns and the animatronics' increasingly lifelike behavior, confirming that possession affected their actions even before players experienced it firsthand. These clippings establish the franchise's love of environmental storytelling, showing rather than telling the tragedy that set events in motion. And the private room in sister location contains one of the franchise's most significant Easter eggs, requiring players to input the code 1983 on a keypad to trigger a screen showing camera feeds from the FNAF 4 house. This revelation confirmed that the crying child's bedroom existed as a real location with physical surveillance equipment, not just a manifestation of nightmares. The discovery sparked massive debate about FNAF 4's nature, whether the nightmare animatronics existed as sound disk illusions or actual robots, whether William Afton had been watching his dying son's room, or whether someone else placed these cameras. The Easter egg transformed FNAF 4 from an abstract nightmare game into a concrete piece of the timeline, at connecting sister location's underground facility to the crying child's suburban home through this hidden technological link. Bread Bear, or Bread Bear, exists as a joke Easter egg that became community legend. In FNAF World's Halloween update, this animatronic made of bread appeared as an ultra-rare encounter, with no explanation for its existence or purpose beyond sheer absurdity. The character design, a crude bear made from loaves of bread instead of fur, exemplifies Scott Cawthon's willingness to include completely inexplicable content alongside serious lore. Bread Bear appears nowhere else in the franchise, but achieved meme status, representing the lighter side of AF's community culture, where even the most random elements get celebrated and analyzed. The Exotic Butters running gag began as a throwaway line in Sister Location's fake ending, where Circus Baby's voice thanks the player for completing their tasks and offers exotic butters as compensation. The phrase's absurdity in context, receiving fancy butter as reward for narrowly escaping killer animatronics, made it instantly memorable. Scott leaned into the joke in subsequent games, making exotic butters appear as background details, achievement names, and references across the franchise. The gag demonstrates how Easter eggs don't always need narrative significance, that sometimes a funny phrase can become beloved purely through community embrace. The Nightmarian Easter egg in Ultimate Custom Night creates one of the game's most challenging obstacles. With a 1 in 10 chance at the start of each night, and a tentacle blocks the right vent permanently, forcing players to redirect strategies built around specific door and vent combinations. This randomness adds unpredictability to a game where success depends on memorizing patterns, making each attempt feel slightly different, even when using the same animatronic roster. Nightmarian's ability to fundamentally alter the playing field through pure chance embodies the philosophy that Easter eggs shouldn't just be visual treats, but can actively affect gameplay in meaningful ways. Old Man Consequence's fishing pond scene in Ultimate Custom Night, accessible by setting only OMC to level 1 and catching a fish, transports players to a retro-styled lakeside where a red alligator sits fishing. The character tells the player to rest, to leave the demon to his demons, to stop seeking vengeance. And this peaceful scene, so tonally different from the nightmare challenges filling the rest of UCN, suggests an escape route from the cycle of torment, implying that Cassidy's spirit could choose to move on, rather than perpetuating William Afton's punishment. The Easter egg takes FNAF World's pond drowning scene and gives it narrative weight, transforming what seemed like a joke ending into genuine spiritual advice about letting go. Glitchtrap's Plague Doctor mask, variant in Help Wanted, appears extremely rarely, replacing his normal rabbit face with a beaked, sinister mask that references historical plague doctors, but also suggests transformation or disguise. This variant has no explained lore significance, but adds to Glitchtrap's unsettling presence, suggesting the entity can alter its appearance, or that what players see as Spring Bonnie might just be one of many forms it can assume. The rarity makes encountering it feel genuinely disturbing, like glimpsing something the game didn't mean to show. The mini-arenas appearing on the player's television in Sister Location serve no mechanical purpose, but demonstrate that the facility's animatronics can reach into your living space, that the cameras supposedly keeping you safe also allow observation from the other side. These tiny ballerina figures, scaled-down versions of those accompanying Ballora, perch on the TV set, watching you with their featureless faces, and when you notice them, they're already gone. The violation of your supposed safe space, having evidence that something entered the room while you watched other screens. I creates paranoia that extends beyond any specific threat these characters pose. Yendo, the golden-eyed endoskeleton appearing rarely in sister location's Fun-Time Auditorium, suggests prototype technology or failed experiments that often kept around despite their apparent uselessness. The character's design mirrors Fun-Time Freddy's endoskeleton, but with distinct coloring, implying a separate creation with a different purpose. Later inclusion in Ultimate Custom Night gave Yendo actual mechanics, but the original Easter egg presentation made them feel like a mistake, a glimpse of something that shouldn't exist, becoming briefly visible before reality reasserts proper order. These Easter eggs transform Five Nights at Freddy's from games you can complete into games you can never fully exhaust. And there's always one more rare screen you haven't seen, one more code you haven't tried, one more combination of conditions that might trigger something new. Scott Cawthon's commitment to hiding content so deeply that players needed frame-by-frame analysis, data mining, and collective investigation created a treasure hunt mentality where discovering an Easter egg felt like genuine achievement. The rarity of some encounters meant you could play for hundreds of hours and never see everything, ensuring that even veteran players might learn about content they'd never personally experienced. And this philosophy extended beyond Easter eggs into the community itself, where theories and investigations became as central to the franchise as the actual games. Tier 6. Community and Theories. The cultural phenomenon. At this depth, we move beyond what exists in the games themselves to examine the community that formed around Five Nights at Freddy's and how fan theories became inseparable from the franchise's identity. The relationship between Scott Cawthon and his fan base, particularly the theorists who dedicated countless hours to solving his mysteries, represents something unique in gaming history. MatPat's Game Theory channel became synonymous with FNAF lore, creating a feedback loop where Scott would plant clues specifically for theorists to discover, while theories influenced how Scott developed future games. MatPat produced over 50 videos about the franchise between 2014 and 2024, building a dedicated audience that treated each upload as a major event in the community. His theories ranged from solving specific mysteries like the identity of the crying child, to constructing complete timelines attempting to organize every game into a coherent chronology. Scott Cawthon explicitly acknowledged MatPat's importance in a Reddit comment, stating that one particular theory video had resolved points of contention in the community and saved Scott from needing to make another game just to clarify misunderstandings. This endorsement, while not confirming the theory as 100% accurate, validated the approach and encouraged further investigation. The infamous mic trap theory exemplifies how community speculation can diverge dramatically from author intent. After Sister Location's release, many theorists, including MatPat, proposed that Michael Afton, the player character scooped by Anard, he eventually became Springtrap, the rotting corpse inside the Spring Bonnie suit in FNAF 3. This theory attempted to explain why Michael would return to Fazbear's Fright, why Springtrap survived the fire, and why certain voice lines seem to reference Michael's experience. Scott's comment about people being upset over Mic Trap and the idea of Purple Guy being literally purple suggested this theory had missed crucial elements, that William Afton remained Springtrap, while Michael's purple color came from physical decay rather than his sprite representation. The correction demonstrated how even well-researched theories could misinterpret Scott's intent, that the cryptic storytelling method left room for plausible but incorrect conclusions. And Dream Theory proposed that all 5 Nights at Freddy's games took place in the crying child's coma dreams, that none of the events were literally happening, but rather represented his dying brain processing trauma through the lens of the animatronics he feared. This theory gained traction after FNAF 4's release, pointing to the bedroom setting, the hospital equipment sounds, the emphasis on nightmares as evidence that we were experiencing a child's dying hallucinations. Scott directly addressed Dream Theory in interviews, stating it was a misinterpretation of FNAF 4's purpose, that while the game contained dream elements, it wasn't suggesting the entire franchise existed only in someone's imagination, and the fact that a major theory channel included Dream Theory in analysis videos shows how persuasive the evidence seemed despite being fundamentally wrong. Scott's gentle correction, rather than harsh dismissal, acknowledged the theory's internal logic, while steering the community back toward more productive interpretations. The FNAF 4 box represents the franchise's most enduring mystery, and Scott's most notorious unresolved promise. The locked box appears at the end of Night 7, with the message, "Some things are best left forgotten for now," implying future revelation of its contents. Years passed without this revelation, leading to countless theories about what might be inside. Golden chains, the crying child's personal items, evidence of who caused the bite of 83, proof of various timeline theories. Eventually, Scott admitted on Reddit that the community had fundamentally misunderstood FNAF 4's story, making the planned revelation meaningless. He stated that the box's contents were the pieces put together, implying it was meant to contain the answer to FNAF 4's questions. But since the community never reached consensus on what those questions were, opening the box would satisfy no one. This rare admission of defeat, that Scott had created a mystery too obscure to solve through normal gameplay, became legendary. The box transformed from a promise into a symbol of FNAF's impenetrable mysteries, evidence that even the creator couldn't always deliver the clarity players sought. Gregbot theory emerged from Security Breach and its therapy session files, proposing that Gregory isn't a human child, but a robotic replica, possibly of the crying child, or simply an advanced animatronic with implanted memories. The theory points to Gregory's knowledge of the Pizzaplex's systems, his ability to survive situations that should kill a normal child, the therapy sessions that glitch when discussing him, and thematic parallels to William Afton's putting him back together obsession. While unconfirmed, Gregbot gained traction because it explained anomalies in Gregory's character while fitting established lore about consciousness, transfer, and remnant preservation. The theory demonstrates how the community learned to suspect any character might not be what they appear. That in a universe where Michael survived being scooped and walked around as a corpse, where digital consciousness possession exists, assuming any character is straightforwardly human seems naive. The debate over whether FNAF 2 is a prequel or sequel to the first game consumed early theorists until phone calls and paychecks established the chronology. The improved animatronics in FNAF 2 initially suggested advancement, that this was a more modern location than the original game, but subtle details like the withered animatronics in parts and service, the pre-recorded nature of Phone Guy's calls, and the paycheck dated November 1987 confirmed it took place before FNAF 1's events. This revelation that Scott would tell his story non-chronologically, jumping backward to show how the haunting began, established that solving the timeline required careful attention to environmental details rather than assuming release order matched in-universe order. The prequel nature of FNAF2 explained why the Bite of 87 was mentioned in the first game but never shown, as players hadn't yet experienced that game. Why Phone Guy was alive to give instructions despite dying in FNAF1, and why the animatronics looked so damaged. Wilhel versus Mike Purgatory theories about Ultimate Custom Night's nature created the franchise's most philosophical debate. Wilhel proposes that UCN represents William Afton's personal hell, an eternal punishment where he's forced to face all the animatronics across all games in an impossible survival challenge, tormented specifically by the vengeful spirit, who refuses to let him die peacefully. Mike Purgatory suggests instead that Michael Afton experiences this nightmare, a processing guilt over his brother's death and the horrors he witnessed while trying to stop his father. The evidence supporting each theory includes voice lines that could reference either character. The presence of Nightmare Fredbear, who Michael would recognize from his brother's death. The vengeful spirit's apparent gender, which some sources suggest is male, and the thematic appropriateness of punishment versus purgation. Scott never definitively confirmed either interpretation, leaving UCN's canonical status ambiguous, a game that might exist purely as a nightmare scenario without clear placement in the timeline. The Bite victim's name sparked years of investigation into whether he was called Chris, Evan, Garrett, or some other name never clearly established. Theories stem from code hidden in the survival logbook, and where altered text and faint questions suggested spirits communicating through the book. Elaborate ciphers appeared to spell out names, but the process required such complex interpretation that different solvers reached different conclusions. Chris became popular through fandom use, Evan emerged from logbook analysis, and Garrett surfaced through voice synthesis of certain audio files. The movie's revelation that the crying child analog was named Garrett reignited these debates, with some arguing the movie confirmed the game's name, while others insisted the movie existed in a separate continuity. The fact that such a basic detail as the protagonist's name remained unconfirmed after years demonstrates how deeply Scott buried his secrets. A purple guy's color sparked ridiculous amounts of debate over whether his sprite's purple hue was literal or representational. Some argued the character appeared purple because he died in the Spring Bonnie suit and rotted. Others that it symbolically represented him hiding in shadows or working during night shifts under specific lighting. Scott's clarification that William was purple metaphorically, while Michael was purple literally, resolved the debate while acknowledging how the simple sprite colors had created genuine confusion. The distinction meant William's purple appearance in minigames represented his shadowy nature, his tendency to work unseen, while Michael's purple sprite in sister locations ending accurately depicted his decomposing corpse walking around after Ennard's ejection. The Fazbear Fright debate over canonicity to the games remains contentious. Scott stated the books weren't meant to solve game mysteries directly, but rather fill in blanks and provide parallel stories that illuminate concepts without one-to-one correspondence. Stories like The Man in Room 1280 clearly paralleled Ultimate Custom Night's events, showing a burned man kept alive by vengeful spirits. But whether this meant UCN canonically happened in the games or just demonstrated similar concepts remained unclear. The community split between those who treated the books as essential reading for understanding the games and those who focused only on information explicitly present in the games themselves. This divide affects how people interpret major concepts like Remnant, Agony, and the Mimic's origins, as Scott Cawthon's direct engagement with the community through Reddit comments, Steam posts, and occasional interviews created a unique relationship where the creator became almost a character within his own mystery. His cryptic responses to questions, his habit of confirming some theories while deliberately ignoring others, his occasional admissions of mistakes or unclear storytelling, all contributed to treating FNAF lore as a collaboration between creator and community. Scott's retirement in 2021, following controversy over his political donations, marked the end of an era, though he remained involved in a consulting capacity. MatPat's own retirement from game theory in 2024, featuring a cameo from Scott, where he invited MatPat into his house to discuss the lore. It felt like the conclusion of the parasocial relationship that had defined a FNAF's cultural impact. This tier reveals how Five Nights at Freddy's transcended being merely a game series to become a genuine cultural phenomenon, a collective investigation where theories were as important as official content, where the community's engagement shaped the franchise's direction, where solving mysteries became a competitive sport among YouTubers and Reddit users. The relationship between Scott and his theorists, particularly MatPat, represented something rare in gaming, a creator who actively encouraged deep analysis while maintaining enough mystery to keep the community endlessly engaged. And below even this community layer, in the depths of the iceberg, lie the hoaxes and lost content that show how the fandom's hunger for new mysteries sometimes created its own false leads. Tier 7. Hoaxes and lost media. Myths and memories. Descending into the 7th tier uncovers the fabrications, the abandoned content, the things that never were but which the community believed or desperately sought. This layer exists at the intersection of wish fulfillment and deception, where hoaxes took on lives of their own, and lost media became holy grails for archivists determined to preserve every fragment of FNAF history. Sparky the dog stands as perhaps the franchise's most notorious hoax, a fake animatronic that fooled countless players in the earliest days of FNAF 1. A grainy image showing a robot dog supposedly hidden in the kitchen or backstage area circulated widely, accompanied by claims that players could encounter Sparky by following specific steps or surviving certain nights. The image was entirely fabricated, a photoshopped creation that preyed on players' desire to discover secrets beyond the known animatronics. The hoax gained such traction that Scott Cawthon eventually acknowledged it through Easter eggs in later games, with Ultimate Custom Night including voice lines referencing how I was the first, and other nods to Sparky's legendary status. The hoax demonstrates how the community's hunger for hidden content made them susceptible to convincing fakes that the promise of an undiscovered animatronic was enough to override critical analysis of obviously edited images. Shadow Balloon Boy emerged as a transitional figure between hoax and reality, unbeginning as a supposed secret in FNAF 2, before becoming a confirmed character named XOR in Ultimate Custom Night. Early reports of a shadowy BB appearing under the desk or in various locations were dismissed as hoaxes until players confirmed rare encounters. The character existed in a strange space, real but so rare that legitimate encounters were indistinguishable from fabricated claims, making it impossible to separate truth from fiction in early reports. Jay's similar placement under the desk, completely unexplained in FNAF 2, contributed to confusion about whether Shadow BB was a separate entity or just JJ misidentified. The fact that actual Easter eggs could be rare enough to seem like hoaxes demonstrates how Scott's design philosophy created perfect conditions for misinformation to spread. The fake FNAF 4 bootleg represents lost media that was never meant to be preserved. A scam iOS app that charged $10 for what was allegedly the official mobile port of FNAF 4. Players who purchased the game found it was actually a crude side-scrolling platformer where you controlled Freddy, having nothing to do with the actual FNAF experience. The screenshots used to advertise it included bizarre images like the sniper from Team Fortress 2 sitting in the FNAF 1 office, obvious signs of fraud that somehow didn't prevent people from purchasing. Scott Cawthon filed a DMCA takedown, and the app was removed from the store, but for years no one had archived it, making it genuinely lost media. In 2024, someone came forward with an IPA file they downloaded in 2022 of finally preserving this piece of FNAF history that existed purely as a scam preying on fans' eagerness for new content. Purple Guy in the Office hoax from FNAF 2 showed a supposed rare event where the Purple Guy character appeared in the office itself, staring at the player before triggering a jump scare or game crash. The hoax included edited footage where someone had placed a purple sprite in the office, making it appear like an actual Easter egg. The video spread rapidly because it seemed plausible given FNAF's love of rare events, and the Purple Guy's established importance to the lore made players want to encounter him directly. The hoax was eventually debunked through code analysis, but it had already influenced theories about the game's mechanics and whether William Afton could appear as more than just a minigame sprite. And the success of this hoax demonstrated that players would believe almost any claim if it seemed to align with the franchise's themes. Five Nights at Freddy Bear's version 1.1 presented as supposed leaked images from FNAF's beta development, showing early office designs, different animatronic models, and characters that were allegedly scrapped from the final game. The images depicted a wolf animatronic and a beaver character, neither of which appeared in the finished product, alongside a primitive office layout and a supposed Kickstarter page for the game. The hoax was elaborate enough to convince many players it represented genuine early development, but analysis revealed the images were created using assets from the final game, with modifications to suggest an earlier state. The hoax tapped into community fascination with Scott Cawthon's development process, the desire to see how FNAF evolved from initial concept to released product. Lost fan games became a preservation concern as early FNAF-inspired games disappeared when their Game Jolt pages were deleted or their creators abandoned development. Projects like Another Story of Freddy's and various other unnamed fan games from 2014 and 2015 vanished, leaving only screenshots and memories in community discussions. The FNAF Fangame Archive project attempted to collect and preserve these lost games, recognizing that they represented important pieces of the franchise's cultural impact, even if they weren't official content, as some lost fan games allegedly included interesting concepts or innovations that influenced later official games, making their disappearance a genuine loss to understanding how the community responded to and built upon Scott's original vision. Cancelled FNAF movie scripts represent official lost media, with Scott Cawthon describing multiple screenplay attempts that were written and discarded before the final movie entered production. His Reddit post detailing these abandoned scripts included synopses that sound increasingly bizarre. One about a security guard dealing with animatronic misbehavior that turned out to be a secret government robot factory. Another where sentient plushies take Manhattan. A third focusing on teenagers sneaking into Freddy's after hours to retrieve a lost toy. Scott's description of these scripts and why they didn't work provides rare insight into how difficult it was to adapt FNAF's environmental storytelling into a traditional narrative film structure. The scripts themselves remain lost, likely never to be released, but their described contents became legendary examples of how adaptation can go wrong. The Banana Splits movie Hoax suggested that this 2019 horror film about murderous animatronic characters was originally written as a FNAF movie before being retooled. The theory gained traction because Warner Brothers owned both properties at different times, and the basic plot beat of killer animatronics in a family entertainment venue seemed suspiciously similar. However, no evidence confirmed this connection, and it likely represents coincidental overlap in conceptual space rather than direct FNAF influence. The hoax persists because it seems plausible that a studio might repurpose a rejected FNAF screenplay by changing character names and details. The FNAF 3 Trailer 2 Hoax involved a fake trailer for the game that circulated before the official trailer released, featuring footage that was actually from a fan game but edited to appear official. The hoax trailer included gameplay elements that seemed plausible given FNAF 2's mechanics, making it convincing enough that some news sites reported it as legitimate before Scott released the actual trailer. The incident showed how the community's hunger for new content created opportunities for convincing fakes to spread before official information could debunk them. As a nightmare shadow, Freddy and other supposed scrapped characters from FNAF 4's Halloween update spawned hoaxes about content that almost made it into the game, but was cut at the last minute. These claims reference unused character slots in the code or placeholder names in game files, suggesting that more nightmare variants existed during development. While some legitimate unused content was discovered through data mining, many claims about specific scrapped characters were fabrications that misinterpreted or exaggerated what the code actually contained. The private room monitor's hoax in Sister Location claimed that the screens showing FNAF 4's bedroom continued to show new camera angles or events if you left them running long enough, that Michael could potentially watch his father experimenting on his brother in real time. And this hoax emerged from misunderstanding how the Easter egg worked and from desperate hope that the game would reveal more about the crying child's fate. Players reported seeing different images or movements in the monitors that were likely just artifacts of staring at static screens for extended periods, creating false patterns from noise. Lost transcripts from Scott's early communications with publishers and developers allegedly contained explicit lore answers that Scott provided before deciding to keep the story cryptic. These supposed transcripts appeared in various Reddit threads and were quickly debunked, but the idea that definitive answers existed somewhere in Scott's private correspondence became appealing to theorists frustrated by ambiguity. The hoaxes fabricated conversations where Scott explained the bite victim's name, confirmed specific character identities, or revealed what was in the FNAF 4 box, all presented as leaked information from development archives. The truth behind these hoaxes and lost media reveals a community so invested in the franchise's mysteries that they generated their own false leads, created their own expanded universe of claims and counterclaims that sometimes overshadowed the actual games. The line between what Scott Cawthon created and what the community imagined he created became porous, with hoaxes sometimes influencing real theories that then shaped how people interpreted official content. This tier of the iceberg shows that FNAF's mythology extends beyond what exists in released games to include the phantoms and fabrications that haunt the spaces between official entries, the ghost stories about ghost stories that demonstrate how badly people wanted more mysteries to solve. Tier 8. Fan games and Fanverse, community creations. The 8th tier examines how Five Nights at Freddy's inspired a massive fan game ecosystem, with creators building their own variations on the formula, and how some of these fan games became officially recognized as part of the franchise through the Fazbear Fanverse initiative. This community creativity became so significant that it influenced the official games and expanded FNAF's reach, far beyond what Scott Cawthon could have created alone. Five Nights at Candy's established itself as perhaps the most successful FNAF fan game series, creating an original story about another failed family restaurant with its own tragic history. The game featured Candy the Cat and Cindy the Cat as the main animatronics, with storytelling that matched and sometimes exceeded the official game's quality. Creator Emil Mako developed 3 main entries, plus the reimagined Five Nights at Candy's Remastered, each building on the previous game's mechanics while introducing innovations like phone dude-style recorded messages and more elaborate minigames. The series connected to FNAF's universe through thematic parallels rather than direct crossover, showing another establishment where animatronic entertainment led to tragedy and possession. When Scott launched the Fazbear Fanverse initiative, Five Nights at Candy's became one of the first projects included, receiving funding and official endorsement that allowed Emil to bring the series to consoles and create merchandise. The joy of creation evolved from a simple camera-based fan game into a series of interconnected horror experiences culminating in the Joy of Creation story mode, which told the tale of Scott Cawthon himself being hunted through his home by twisted versions of FNAF animatronics. The game's use of Scott as the protagonist, naming him explicitly and setting the game in a recreation of his actual house, created a meta-narrative about the creator being consumed by his creations. The animatronics in TJOC moved with disturbing fluidity thanks to advanced animation systems, making them feel far more threatening than the static cameras and limited movement of the original games. The final level, where you play as Scott in his office trying to finish FNAF 1 while ignoring and Foxy hunt him, became iconic. And TJOC's inclusion in the Fanverse initiative allowed creator Nixon to develop expanded versions and bring the series to new platforms, cementing it as one of FNAF's most significant fan creations. One Night at Flumpty's distinguished itself through its absurdist humor mixed with genuine horror, featuring Flumpty Bumpty, a sentient egg who can transcend time and space and exists beyond the laws of reality. The game's creator Jonachrome crafted 3 entries that somehow balance silly character designs. The mascots are mostly breakfast foods and office supplies, with effective scares and surprisingly complex lore. Flumpty's declaration that he's coming to kill the player, and his ability to appear anywhere without needing logical explanation, made him a unique antagonist. The series' art style, hand-drawn, rather than rendered in 3D, gave it a distinct identity within the FNAF fan game ecosystem. After years of the series being officially unavailable, its inclusion in the Fanverse initiative allowed Jonachrome to re-release updated versions, introducing new generations to the Egg's particular brand of horror. Popgoes created an elaborate alternate timeline where Purple Guy was arrested after the missing children incident, preventing the events of the main games, but creating new problems when investigators tried to digitize the animatronics AI to understand what happened. The game featured a diverse cast of weasel animatronics in a unique pizzeria setting, with gameplay that emphasized printer mechanics and part assembly rather than pure survival. Creator Kane worked with a team to develop extensive lore that connected to FNAF through divergent history and exploring what might have happened if justice had been served early. The game's commitment to original characters while maintaining FNAF's spirit made it stand out. Popgo's Evergreen, developed as part of the Fanverse initiative, rebuilt the original game with enhanced graphics and expanded story, plus a prequel set in the 1980s that explored the timeline's divergence point. The Fazbear Fanverse initiative itself represented Scott Cawthon's recognition that fan games had become essential to the franchise's identity. Rather than trying to control or limit these community projects, Scott offered funding and official endorsement, helping developers bring their games to consoles, create merchandise, and expand their visions. The initiative included One Night at Flumpty's, Popgo's, 5 Nights at Candy's, and The Joy of Creation, and with the stipulation that the games would remain free on PC, while possibly getting paid ports to other platforms. This support legitimized fan game development as a valid path within the horror game industry, showing that successful fan creations could become official parts of the franchise they were inspired by. 5 Nights at F's. Boys took the opposite approach from most fan games, creating a deliberately crude RPG parody of FNAF, with absurdist humor and meta-commentary about the franchise. The game featured Freddy, Bonnie, and the others as foul-mouthed protagonists, fighting increasingly ridiculous threats, with gameplay that mocked JRPG conventions, while telling a genuinely entertaining story. The series ran for 3 main games plus spin-offs, becoming beloved for its irreverent tone and willingness to ridicule FNAF's more pretentious elements. Though never part of the official fanverse due to its parodic nature, FNAFB demonstrated that community creations could completely subvert the source material's tone while still celebrating what made it special. The return to Freddy's series created controversy as one of the first major FNAF fan game series, with quality that varied wildly across its many installments. The original games featured crude models and simple mechanics, but the series' ambitious scope, attempting to tell stories across multiple locations and time periods, attracted a dedicated following. Later entries improved dramatically in quality, particularly after the series was rebooted by new developers. RTF's troubled development history, including multiple cancellations and creator drama, made it emblematic of the challenges fan game developers faced in matching the official game's quality. Those Nights at Rachel's built a small cult following by taking the FNAF formula in a darker direction, with animatronics designed to be genuinely unsettling rather than recognizable as kid-friendly characters. The series featured a strip club setting and adult themes that pushed boundaries while maintaining the survival horror gameplay. The fan game's commitment to its premise, however uncomfortable, demonstrated how the FNAF template could be adapted to different contexts beyond family restaurants. Dormitabis earned notoriety for its extreme difficulty and dark subject matter, featuring grotesque character designs and themes darker than most fan games attempted. The game pushed content boundaries to the point of controversy, with its creator later being revealed to have engaged in predatory behavior that led to his removal from the community. The game itself remains a contentious topic, with some appreciating its technical achievements, while others argue its content crossed lines that fan creations should respect. 5 Nights at Treasure Island, based on the abandoned by Disney creepypasta, created an atmosphere of decay and corporate malfeasance that resonated with FNAF's themes. The game featured photo-negative Mickey and other corrupted Disney characters stalking an abandoned resort, with mechanics that emphasized hiding and observation. multiple versions and remakes of FNAF were developed by different teams over the years, each interpreting the core concept differently. These fan games and countless others demonstrate how Five Nights at Freddy's inspired a generation of game developers to tell their own horror stories using similar mechanics and themes. The fan game community became a training ground where aspiring developers learned game design, storytelling, and project management, with successful fan game creators sometimes transitioning to professional development careers. Scott's willingness to support these projects rather than issuing takedowns created an ecosystem where creativity flourished, where fans could become creators themselves, and where the franchise's influence extended far beyond the official entries. This tier reveals that FNAF's legacy isn't just the games Scott made, but the countless variations and interpretations that emerged from a community empowered to explore this universe on their own terms. Tier 9. Books and Extended Universe. Parallel Narratives. The 9th tier delves into the sprawling literary universe that developed alongside the games, a collection of novels and short stories that illuminate the franchise's concepts while telling their own self-contained narratives. Understanding these books requires accepting their peculiar relationship to game canon, where they're not direct explanations, but rather parallels that demonstrate principles through different characters and situations. The Silver Eyes trilogy are comprising the Silver Eyes, the Twisted Ones, and the Fourth Closet, represents Scott Cawthon's first major expansion of FNAF into novel form, co-written with Kira Breed Risley. These books follow Charlie Emily years after her childhood in Hurricane, Utah, where her father Henry built animatronics for a local pizzeria. The trilogy reimagines FNAF's core elements through a different lens, with Charlie discovering she's actually an android built by her father to replace his murdered daughter, a concept that illuminates themes of artificial life and identity without directly occurring in the games. William Afton appears as the antagonist, operating under the name Dave Miller, while secretly building twisted amalgamations of flesh and machinery in underground bunkers. The books introduce concepts like illusion discs that make animatronics appear human, or make horrifying creations look innocent. Technology that helps explain how FNAF's world functions, while not being explicitly confirmed as game canonical. The twisted animatronics from these novels represent biological horror merged with mechanical, creatures with actual organs and fur grafted onto endoskeletons, far more disturbing than possessed robots alone. Their existence in the books demonstrates William Afton's obsession, taken to its most horrifying extreme, creating truly living machines rather than just haunted ones. This concept of bioengineering connects thematically to remnant and possession, showing different approaches to bridging the gap between life and mechanism. Fazbear Frights, a series of short story collections, took a different approach than the novels, presenting individual tales that often ended tragically for their protagonists. Scott described these stories as meant to fill in blanks in the game's lore while remaining distinct narratives. Stories like Into the Pit showed a ball pit that served as a portal to the past, allowing a boy to witness the missing children murders. To Be Beautiful featured a girl who made a deal with a mysterious figure to become beautiful, only to discover she was being replaced piece by piece with trash. Count the Ways trapped a girl inside Funtime Freddy, who offered various gruesome deaths while she desperately tried to escape. The man in room 1280 became crucial to understanding Ultimate Custom Night's nature, telling the story of a burned man kept alive in a hospital by an angry spirit who refuses to let him die. The parallels to William Afton being tortured by Cassidy became undeniable, suggesting UCN represented this eternal torment, where the vengeful spirit maintained consciousness purely to ensure William couldn't escape to death's peace. The story showed Andrew, likely the game's vengeful spirit's parallel, eventually letting go and allowing both himself and Afton to move on. 1:35 a.m. introduced Ella, a doll that became animate through agony, establishing this concept as distinct from Remnant. Step Closer showed a teenager named Pete, experiencing visions that aligned with Foxy's perspective, suggesting Remnant could transfer memories and experiences between people and animatronics. Mom Blackbird featured a shadow animatronic that represented accumulating guilt, a manifestation of psychological horror made physical through FNAF's supernatural rules. The story, What We Found, explored the Fazbear's Fright location after its fire, with investigators discovering Springtrap's body and experiencing hallucinations from touching the Remnant-infected remains. This story illuminated how Remnant could affect living people, not just animatronics, creating visions and compulsions in those exposed to it. Eleanor emerged as a recurring antagonist across multiple Fazbear Fright stories, a circus baby-like entity that fed on agony and seemed to orchestrate many of the tragedies. Her pendant necklace, containing concentrated Remnant, allowed her to grant wishes with horrifying consequences, in transforming people into what they desired while taking something essential in return. Eleanor connected to the broader concept of agony entities, beings that emerged from accumulated suffering rather than individual possessions. The Stitch Wraith epilogues running through Fazbear Frights told an overarching story about Jake, a boy who possessed a Simon doll after cancer took his life, and Andrew, the angry spirit attached to William Afton. When Afton's body exploded at the distribution center, spreading infected Remnant across various objects, Jake and Andrew fused into the Stitch Wraith, a patchwork endoskeleton driven to collect and neutralize the contaminated items. Their journey represented finding peace through helping others, with Jake eventually helping Andrew let go of vengeance. And Tales from the Pizzaplex represents the most recent book series, explicitly set in the security breach era, and providing backstory for the Pizzaplex's construction and the Mimic's origins. These stories introduced the Mimic as Edwin Murray's creation, showing how it learned violence from its creator's grief-induced rage. GGY revealed Gregory's potential involvement with Glitchtrap before security breach, suggesting he might have been under the entity's influence, manipulating the Pizzaplex's systems under the username GGY. The storyteller showed an AI spreading through the Pizzaplex's network, attempting to tell the perfect story by manipulating reality itself. This concept connected to themes of control and artificial intelligence that defined the modern FNAF era. Alec Lally's game featured a VR game that infected players through exposure, much like Help Wanted's Glitchtrap, demonstrating the danger of digitized consciousness. The book's relationship to game canon remains the subject of intense debate. Scott's statement that they're not meant to solve game mysteries directly, but rather fill in blanks and show how concepts work, creates ambiguity about what transfers between media. Does the Mimic's origin story in Tales from the Pizzaplex explain the game character's backstory, or just provide a parallel that demonstrates similar principles? Did Andrew torture William in the games the way he did in the books? Or does that story just illustrate the concept of a vengeful spirit preventing death? Some fans treat the books as essential reading, mining them for details about remnant mechanics, agony properties, and character relationships that illuminate the games. Others insist on game-only interpretations, arguing that the book's alternative continuity makes them unreliable sources for understanding the main timeline. This divide affects how people interpret major events, with book readers seeing explicit confirmation of concepts that game-only players consider speculative. The books succeed in expanding FNAF's world, even when their canonical status remains uncertain. They demonstrate that Scott's universe operates on consistent principles even when specific events differ between media. Remnant works the same way whether it's being injected into twisted animatronics or funtime robots. Agony corrupts objects similarly, whether it's possessing a trash dummy or contaminating Pizzaplex merchandise. The core rules about death, e-consciousness, and mechanical bodies remain stable even as individual stories diverge. Certain book elements became so influential that they affected how fans understood the games retroactively. The concept of remnant being a melted, injectable substance came primarily from the fourth closet's description, with the games never explicitly showing this process, despite heavily implying it. The idea that agony could exist separately from remnant emerged from Fazbear Frights, providing an explanation for phenomena the games never quite clarified. The Mimic's complete backstory exists only in books, making Tales from the Pizzaplex essential reading for anyone trying to understand Security Breach's villain. This tier demonstrates that Five Nights at Freddy's expanded far beyond its point-and-click origins into a genuine multimedia franchise, and where novels and short stories carried as much weight as games in defining the universe's rules and expanding its mythology. The books allowed Scott to explore ideas too complex or explicit for the game's environmental storytelling, to develop characters through internal monologue and descriptive prose in ways that silent protagonists and hidden minigames couldn't achieve. Whether you consider them canonical, parallel, or simply supplemental, the books became inseparable from FNAF's identity, another layer of mystery where truth hid between different versions of similar events, waiting for someone to identify which details mattered across all media. Tier 10, The Abyss, the deepest mysteries. We've reached the bottom of the iceberg, the abyss where the strangest connections, the most obscure trivia, and the darkest implications lurk, and this final tier contains elements so buried that even dedicated fans might not know them, secrets that require exhaustive research, or that remain genuinely unexplained even after 10 years of investigation. Scott Cawthon's pre-FNAF career provides context for how Five Nights at Freddy's came to be. He developed Christian-themed games and animations throughout the early 2000s, creating projects like The Pilgrim's Progress and various educational software. His game, Chipper and Sons Lumber Company, received criticism that the main character, a beaver, looked like an animatronic nightmare, with reviewers noting the uncanny valley quality of the anthropomorphic animals. Rather than being discouraged, Scott embraced this feedback, deliberately designing characters for FNAF that would trigger that same unsettling response. The beaver from Chipper appears in FNAF World as Chipper's Revenge, a meta-joke about how criticism of one game birthed the franchise. This origin story shows that FNAF emerged not from a horror game concept, but from Scott accepting what others saw as his artistic weakness and transforming it into strength. The Desolate Hope, another pre-FNAF game, featured coffee-making robots and space stations with surprising thematic overlap to FNAF's core concepts. The game explored artificial consciousness, the nature of sacrifice, and whether machines could possess souls. Looking back, The Desolate Hope reads almost as a proof of concept for ideas Scott would later explore through possessed animatronics, the coffee-making robot's personalities, and the game's religious allegory about salvation and damnation prefigured FNAF's questions about spirits, afterlife, and mechanical vessels for consciousness. The Toreador March, Freddy Fazbear's musical theme taken from the opera Carmen, carries darker implications than its jaunty melody suggests. In the opera, the Toreador March accompanies the character Escamillo, who represents death and seduction. The choice to associate this specific musical piece with Freddy creates subtext about death's inevitability and the false cheer masking horror, with the music playing as Freddy approaches the office serving as a countdown to the player's demise. The classical music choice rather than original composition lends the games an unexpected artistic weight, connecting to centuries of operatic tradition about death and desire. The FNAF 1 Steam Description's original version contained a line about the animatronics being left in some kind of free roaming mode at night, that was later changed to clarify they weren't supposed to be mobile at all. This small edit reveals that even Scott's understanding of his own lore evolved, that early descriptions suggested intentional programming, allowing nighttime wandering before the possession explanation became primary. The original phrasing implied Fazbear Entertainment knew the animatronics walked around and accepted it, while later versions painted the movement as entirely supernatural. The number 17 appears with suspicious frequency across the franchise. Five Nights at Freddy's 1 was released on August the 8th, 2014. Add those digits together. 8 plus 8 plus 2 plus 0 plus 1 plus 4 equals 23. Add 2 plus 3 equals 5. The game's original price was $4.99, approximately $5. The first game features 5 animatronics. This pattern recognition represents the abyss looking back, the tendency to find meaning in numbers that might be coincidental, but feel significant given FNAF's puzzle box nature. The Fredbear and Friends TV show visible in FNAF 4's minigames shows a copyright date of 1983, confirming that year as the crying child's death. But the show features Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy alongside Fredbear, suggesting these characters existed before Freddy Fazbear's Pizza opened, that they originated as TV characters before being turned into animatronics, and this implies a media franchise existed parallel to the restaurants, that Fazbear Entertainment might have licensed existing characters rather than creating original ones. The survival logbook's possession by 3 different entities, Cassidy asking questions through altered text, the crying child answering through faint writing, and Michael Afton filling out the book as its owner, creates the franchise's most complex cipher. The process of extracting names from this book requires comparing different text colors, following specific question sequences, and applying number codes that yield letter coordinates. The fact that this single journal contains communication from 3 separate spirits demonstrates how thoroughly Scott embedded secrets, that a throwaway merchandise item released with no fanfare contained crucial lore accessible only through near cryptographic analysis. Phone Guy's identity remains genuinely unknown despite a decade of speculation. Is he just a minimum wage employee reading corporate scripts? Is he someone important to the story whose name was never revealed? His death in FNAF 1, confirmed through the audio of his final message being attacked by animatronics, provides closure to his fate, but not his identity. The day shift at Freddy's fan game series naming him Dave became fan canon for many, but officially he remains Phone Guy, a disembodied voice whose warnings helped and whose demise confirmed the stakes. The private room keypad in sister location, accepting only one specific code, 1983, raises questions about why that security system existed. If the room monitored the FNAF 4 house, where the crying child lived and died, who needed secure access to these feeds? Did William watch his son's room from his underground facility? Did someone else require this surveillance? The fact that this code still worked years after the crying child's death suggests the monitoring system remained active long after it served any purpose. A ghost of William's experiments still running on autopilot. The puppet's music box mechanic in FNAF 2, requiring constant rewinding to keep her contained, implies that Charlotte's spirit can be soothed but never fully settled. The lullaby playing from the box, My Grandfather's Clock, is a song about death and time stopping when the clock's owner dies. The choice to have this specific melody calm the puppet creates thematic resonance about Charlotte's stolen time. The life cut short that stopped her personal clock, while leaving her consciousness trapped in an eternal present. The Mangle's gender debate, where Scott Cawthon finally said yes when asked about Mangle being male or female, refusing to provide a definitive answer, exemplifies his playful relationship with the community. This non-answer became an answer itself, suggesting that Mangle's identity is deliberately ambiguous, that in-universe debates probably mirror the community's arguments. The yes response acknowledged the question, while providing no resolution. Pure Scott energy. Shadow DD, appearing when Deathcoin is used on certain animatronics in Ultimate Custom Night, speaks in a distorted voice that sounds almost like reversed audio. Analysis of these voice lines suggests they might contain hidden messages when played backward or slowed down, but no consensus emerged on their exact content. The character exists at the edge of reality within the game. A glitch made manifest, a character who appears only when you deliberately break the game's intended flow. The Candy Cadet stories in Pizzeria Simulator, about 5 things becoming one, keys melted together, kittens sewn into a single form, children locked in a room together, all serve as metaphors for how Remnant combines multiple souls into single vessels. These stories, told by a minor character easily missed, contain some of the franchise's most explicit lore explanations presented as fairy tales. The repetitive structure, Candy Cadet offering to tell a story with a 1 in 3 chance of each variation, mirrors how FNAF delivers information, randomly, requiring multiple attempts to see all possibilities. The Exotic Butters achievement in Sister Location Custom Night unlocked for completing challenges with Circus Baby, set to difficulty level 10, while other specific animatronics are also active, creates arbitrary achievement conditions that feel like inside jokes. The specificity suggests meaning, but delivers only the butter, continuing the running gag while denying any deeper significance. The Fredbear plush's final line in FN, AF4, spoken in a different text color, with a different speaker apparently taking control. I will put you back together. Shifts from the yellow text speaker, likely William, to a white text speaker, whose identity remains debated. Is this the puppet? Is it Henry? Is it some other entity entirely? The pronoun shift from we will to I will suggests a single being making a promise separate from whoever was speaking previously through the plush. The room for one more achievement in FNAF 2 unlocks by playing as Jeremy for 6 nights, then switching to Fritz for the 7th, getting fired for tampering with animatronics and odor. This achievement confirms that both night guards are separate people, that the player character changes between week 1 and the final night, Yet the story reason for this switch never becomes clear. Why did Jeremy move to day shift? Why did Fritz get hired for a single night? These questions have no official answers. The FNAF movie's continuity, separate from games while containing familiar elements, creates a third universe alongside games and books. Certain details align, others diverge completely, suggesting Scott's vision for FNAF exists as concepts and themes that manifest differently across media, rather than a single canonical timeline. The movie's success ensuring sequels means this alternate continuity will continue developing its own lore. The future of Five Nights at Freddy's remains uncertain, even as new games enter development. Scott's retirement from day-to-day creation while maintaining creative oversight means the franchise continues without its original driving force directly at the helm. Steel Wool Studios' handling of Security Breach and its DLC, the various developers working on Fanverse projects, and whoever takes on future official games will shape FNAF's evolution into territory Scott might never have explored. The iceberg's bottom reveals that even after exhaustive analysis, Five Nights at Freddy's retains mysteries that might never be solved, that Scott Cawthon either hasn't explained or perhaps hasn't decided himself. The FNAF 4 box remains locked. The Mimic's complete nature stays ambiguous. The exact mechanics of Remnant and Agony await definitive clarification, and countless small details across games and books resist clean interpretation. This abyss suggests that some questions don't have answers waiting to be discovered, but rather exist as perpetual mysteries, that the franchise's identity depends partly on maintaining ambiguity that allows endless investigation. We've descended through all 10 tiers, from surface-level knowledge anyone might possess to depths that require total immersion in FNAF's expanded universe. The iceberg reveals that Five Nights at Freddy's functions as collaborative fiction, where Scott provides fragments and the community assembles them into theories that sometimes become canonical through Scott's validation. The franchise's longevity stems not from having all answers available, but from creating space for investigation, for debate, for the collective joy of pattern recognition and mystery solving that transforms passive consumption into active participation. And so, our descent ends here, at the bottom of the iceberg, where the pressure of accumulated lore threatens to crush any remaining certainty about what's true, what's parallel, what's intentional, and what's coincidental. If you've made it this far, through all 10 tiers of mysteries, theories, hoaxes, and confirmations, you understand that Five Nights at Freddy's never was just a horror game about surviving 5 nights in an office. It became a decade-long investigation into how stories can hide in mechanics, how communities can solve mysteries collectively, how a small indie developer could create something so deliberately complex that it spawned thousands of hours of analysis and millions of words of theory. Whether you came to learn or simply to let the narration carry you into sleep, I hope this journey through the complete FNAF iceberg brought something valuable. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the franchise's every layer, please consider liking and subscribing for more explorations of gaming's most intricate mysteries, more stories told at this pace and depth, and more content designed to inform and comfort in equal measure. Until next time, rest well, and remember that some stories are best experienced slowly, one layer at a time, descending deeper until the pressure of it all becomes oddly peaceful. Sleep well,